there everybody, today we are going to be reviewing The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, a book that I've had my eye on for a long time, but this will be an even more special review because this is my read for the Booktube Secret Santa. Now, if you guys have followed my channel for a while, you might remember last year I read Anne of Green Gables to surprise a no. I always get people's channels a musical bookworm? A bookworm of music? Like, I know her, Victoria, I know her name. I just can't remember her YouTube name, which I feel really bad. Okay, yeah, it is A Musical Bookworm, which I think I said that right. Correct? Anyway, last year I read Anne of Green Gables for the Booktube Secret Santa, and I loved it. Maybe I should just describe what a Booktube Secret Santa is. It's just like a regular Secret Santa, except instead of giving gifts to the secret booktuber, you read one of their favorite books and offer up a review of it. So I reached out to a couple of my Booktube friends, and the people who were able to do it or squeezed it into their TBR or weren't in the midst of a crazy semester or whatever got in. I think there's about 12 of us. So you might see, if you follow a couple of us, a bunch of reviews from this format. And if you like this idea, which I think is really fun, I have a playlist that I'll link down below where you can see all of the Secret Santa reviews. But without further ado, I am going to reveal my Secret Santa is Sophia's Thoughts. My huge recommendation for Sophia's channel. It is one of the most relaxing Booktube channels that you can watch, which is a big deal to me. I mean, that's a huge reason why I read Booktube. Watch Booktube. Like, sometimes I want really in the weeds, analysis or these long reviews, but most of the time, honestly, not that she doesn't do that at points, but most of the times I just want something to decompress from the day. I watch Booktube while I'm cleaning the house or just laying on the couch with Callie and sort of just decompressing. And Sophia is so good at that. She primarily does unboxing films of various things, but she also does, the traditional TBRs and wrap-ups. And I know I'm American, so people with British accents always sound, calming and sophisticated to me. But I think even on level with other UK booktubers, I find Sophia's videos very relaxing and really like reading her channel. So I would recommend anyone who's watching this to first go down and subscribe to Sophia's channel, maybe like a couple of her videos. Part of this is getting us to read books that we don't normally would watch, but also part of it is just giving you as a viewer a chance to get to know other booktubers and people who we like to watch, and I think you guys get the idea. Without further ado, let's talk Becky Chambers. So probably most of you have at least heard of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. It's kind of a cool story because she kickstarted this back in the early 2010s, and it has now become this larger phenomenon. It won a Nebula Award, a lot of really cool stuff along those lines, and she's now a very loud voice in the sci-fi fantasy genre and publishing world, which again I think is super cool coming from someone who really just writing sort of brought her up, not even the official channels, but using Kickstarter. I just think that's really cool. The story itself is pretty simple. It's about a woman named Rosemary who has something in her past that is forcing her to basically abandon her old life and assume a pseudonym. You find this all out in the first chapter. And she joins this boring ship, which in this space-time is the way that you're able to traverse through different, parts of this huge galactic space empire. Is you have to bore through reality, basically create a wormhole to create travel and making intergalactic travel and commerce and all this stuff possible. So she's coming onto this ship that has a small, I keep wanting to say staff. What's the right word for that? Crew. There we go. A small crew of really, really interesting, we would call aliens or just other species. And the book is about Rosemary coming into this crew, meeting them, getting to know them, and ultimately, very early on, the crew takes this big job, bigger than they've ever had, to get a lot of money to bore to a new alliance for this galactic empire that's out in the space somewhere, hence A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. because really the majority of this book takes place on the journey to getting this job done and how they learn about each other, different conflicts that arise among them, funny happenstance that's happened. It's mostly about journeying to somewhere rather than like things that actually, you know, are happening and cause other things to happen. A book that I really loved from earlier this year, The House in the Cerulean Sea by T.J. Klune. If you have read that, this book reminded me a lot of that in the sense of it is not at all sort of like dark or I don't know, gritty or anything like that, but it is this like bright, happy look at different people, character studies about people becoming family. It definitely is a found family sort of purpose, and in the same way, a very, very like encouraging read. Like I read this book and continually had a smile on my face, really encouraged me in the midst of like a very hard time in life, not with me personally, I think just in the world in general. I will say I liked House in the Cerulean Sea just a tad bit more than this book. Primarily, one of my main criticisms of this book is that it does start a little slow and there isn't really a strong overarching unity to the story that's pushing it forward. For example, in House in the Cerulean Sea, you have this overarching mystery that sort of permeates the story and sort of this counting clock because the main character has to leave in a couple of weeks. And so there's like something that is pushing a little bit more. This book, because they're just traveling to this place, it really is like, okay, so they're traveling, they're still traveling. This happens and it's interesting, but they're still traveling. And in that way, a lot of people have described this sort of as a sitcom. I wouldn't go that far to say that the individual chapters or stories are that disconnected, because it is like pushing towards a really good conclusion. But it does, just as you go into reading this, because you should read this, get ready for that sort of slower pace and don't be looking sort of under the surface for like an overarching like plot push. It's just not that kind of book. And once I realized that, it really upped my enjoyment of it. And honestly, if it was not a Secret Santa book that I had to do my review before when I released this video, I probably would have taken a much slower time at this book. Not because I didn't enjoy reading it, but I thought it was a very good, slow, read. Something that I wouldn't want to go through as fast as I did normally. So that said, I loved this book. All of the characters in here, even the ones that are given very little actual physical space in the book, get really interesting character arcs. You really get to know them and who they are and feel like you really know them. So when this group starts to come together, easy for me to say, as a true found family, it really is heartwarming because it doesn't seem cliche. It doesn't seem really like easy. There are hard steps that get here along the way, especially with one particular character that I don't want to say for spoiler reasons, but when they are sort of connected into the family, I think is great. And I'll have a little spoiler talk at the end because I want to say a couple things specifically about this book that I really liked, like what happens. Suffice to say, for this non-spoiler review, I thought the character work was great. I really did tear up at several moments, which was surprising for me because, again, I was reading this very quickly and it was such a warm, fun read that it catches you off guard when there's these really strong emotional moments and some hard, emotional, gut-wrenching moments. That's where also it is very different from House in the Cerulean Sea. I'm not going to give you any spoilers about that, but that is very like happy tale all the way through, with obviously some conflict and that sort of thing, but it's a joyful tale. This is mostly joyful tale, but there's some real cost and hard things that happen to the crew in this book. And that's why, like I said, the ending, the last half, I thought was excellent and really ended on a high note. When I first started, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to continue with the rest of this book, and now I can't wait to read more from Becky Chambers. Really enjoyed it, and I want to finish off with my favorite part of this book, and that is this isn't just a fun, heartwarming tale. It also really explores interesting themes about humanity, and it really utilizes various storytelling devices to do that. One of the main sort of world building, so to speak, aspects of this world is that there is this interspecies, I think it's called Galactic, it's not Galactic Empire, that's the bad people in Star Wars. Galactic Coalition? It's something like that. It's GC, but the Galactic Coalition. But it's this interspecies unity that has brought together of various species, of which humans are just one, and not even a major one. They were, in fact, quite poor or like not powerful compared to these other galactic species that enhanced and grew faster than humans evolved. All that to say is that structure gives Chambers a very, very interesting platform from which to investigate multiculturalism in a lot of different ways that we as humans with various different kind of humans have in our actual world. But using the vein of science fiction is able to explore these themes in more extremes, which I think reflect really interestingly on our world. So just one example that is not very spoilery at all is one of the species, again, Syssix is her name, she's a like amphibious-like, a reptilian-like species, and their views of family and sex are very different. In their lives, they have 3 different families: their hatch family, their feather family, and then their brooding family. I forget the exact name of the other ones, but it's basically like for different stages in life, you have different people around you that help you grow and reach your best. They don't have biological parents, they have feather family parents, and in their feather families, they're all united. They're not related, remember this, and they're all of age by the time everyone is in a feather family. They're all sexual partners at least once, and there's this really like just different dynamic and thoughts of family. So Chambers, as she's describing this, does it in such a way, because she's doing it through the viewpoint primarily of the human characters, will reflect on sort of how different that is from a human conception. And it makes you think as the reader about that. And almost every chapter has something like that, where either a human is viewing another culture or another species and thinking about that aspect of it, or another species is viewing the human characters and thinking about that and critiquing that. And it's so fascinating. There's so much really, really, really good just like thoughts that come through that. But I think if you haven't read it and you hear me say that, you might be like, oh, that's kind of boring, just like these essays on like human nature. But somehow Becky Chambers achieves, I think, what an essay on human nature can sometimes do, an interesting one, but also in the vein of this like fascinating story that's lighthearted, that's funny, that has a lot of fun, unique shout-outs to other sci-fi that for sci-fi readers you really like. I mean, one really easy one is the navigators all have to have this like disease to make them see time and space in the right way to help with like the wormhole making. I think it's just like a fun shout out. I think obviously to spice in the Dune world, and the navigators have to take that to be able to go amongst the stars. Just like one example. I really found this an absolute delight. Because of the way that I read it and some of like, I'm not even going to call it pacing issues, but the fact that the first beginning was a little slow getting into it and there isn't that overarching push, it doesn't quite get to best of all time for me, but this is a solid, universal endorsement. I think anyone can read this and really, really enjoy it. I loved this. I'm so glad that Sophia likes Becky Chambers. I think she's read this at least twice, maybe 3 times. I'm just delighted that I read this. Fantastic. Would highly recommend. Let me know if you've read this book. I am now going to step into spoilers just for a couple minutes. So if you haven't read this, please leave now. But before you do, like and subscribe to the channel, please. All right, a couple spoiler things I wanted to mention, especially about this like examination of multiculturalism. Just a couple of other examples of like this idea of like the difference between species, bringing stuff out. I really thought it was interesting. After the pirates board the Wayfarer, there is this moment where the other species are critiquing Rosemary for bottling up her emotions, and that's really like messing with her, and that's a really human thing, and they're like, you need to just let it out, which is of course true that humans do all the time. And I thought it was just a small thing, but a brilliant way of reflecting back on our sort of like sometimes mental ineptitude as a species. The thoughts about war as humans. There's this great email about how humans didn't have to evolve past the point of fighting amongst each other because of the way that the earth got destroyed by natural means. Again, a reflection on like our desire to harm each other, and how if there were other species, how silly that is. But that just reflects on the fact that it's silly that we in the world do that now. And I also want to say at the end, the ultimate bad guys, I forget the name of their species, but I loved the little glimpses we got into the people who eventually attacked the Wayfarer, that like the tyranny of objectiveness, that there always has to be a right way, and if there's ever any doubt, like there's this split and schism, and it leads to violence and violence and violence, because no, people can always be in complete agreement. And it's like the opposite end of like the good part of what GC is, that there's this alien race that like has to be unified. If they disagree on anything, they have to kill one another. It's just so powerful, especially because again, in our world, I know that we like pretend that that doesn't happen, but it does on macro levels like nations and patriotism. But even in our local things, like a difference between churches, or even like differences between like various jobs or people in jobs, or how we look at those who are less fortunate or more fortunate, or all kinds of things that I could go into there that I don't really want to go that much into. The one crew member that I wanted to think of, I think I said they, so many people might have thought I meant Utan. I don't mean that. What I actually mean is the algaeist. I don't know if it's called algaeist, but Corbin, who's like this really cranky, like mean person, who obviously in the course of this book learns that he's a clone, has to deal with like the sins of his father, and like how that reflects upon him, and ultimately how he finds his place in the crew, while being abused by this other species, by being cast out himself, and ultimately saving Utan's life. Now, I actually disagreed with his use of going against Utan's wishes to save him from the virus, but we can discuss that maybe in another video. But I think it's interesting that he finally realized that he didn't have to agree with other people to sympathize and help them. Because that's the central message of this book, that we are never, ever, ever going to agree and embrace the beliefs of everyone around us. But that doesn't mean we can't see them as worthy and do the best that they might feel wanted and desired, and love them as much as we can, as long as they are not doing harm to someone else. And I love that those two things are held in really stark contrast by Becky Chambers in this work. On one hand, this huge accepting viewpoint, but on the other, and the ending I think is really important in this, those who hurt other people and who harm and who, because of their objective views, want to like destroy and hurt and damage people, need to be shunned. And that's a great tension that is hard to equalize, but we have to try, because we can't let others be harmed in our pursuit of unity. And yet, we also do need to pursue that unity and brotherly love. I just thought that was fantastic. I love that message. I love this book. Fantastic job, Becky Chambers. Thank you, Sophia. That's going to be the end. If you've made it all the way here to the end of the spoiler talk, please let me know in the comments below what you think of some of the spoilers, but of course mark them as spoilers. Make sure no one can see them accidentally. I'd love to talk about this book because I'm so happy I read it, and I will definitely be reading some of the sequels very soon. So that's it. That's all I got. First in, last out.